And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to The Bridge, a monthly webinar series hosted by the Masters of Educational Technology program here at Michigan State University. My name is Spencer Greenhall. I'm one of the instructors in the MAET program, and I'll be hosting today's webinar with the help of Rohit Mehta, one of my colleagues in MSU's Educational Psychology and Educational Technology PhD program. Our goal in the Bridge series of webinars is to provide free, high-quality professional development that is focused on teacher practice. We also aim, especially today, to highlight interesting and innovative pedagogies and technologies that are happening in classrooms and on campuses around the world. We hope that what we say in these webinars will have some sort of influence on you and your classroom, and we also hope that you and your experience will have some influence on us. If you're watching us live, you can ask questions or make comments via Twitter using the hashtag MAETBridge or by contributing to the embedded Titan pad at bridge.educ.msu.edu. Today's topic is one that might not be on the minds of a lot of K-12 teachers or even post-secondary teachers right now. But I'm not sure that I can think of a better example of the exciting potential of technology to change the way that we teach and hold class. Today we'll be talking about robots in the classroom, and to do that we've invited an entire team of robot experts to join us. Dr. John Bell, William Kane, Sui Chang, and Amy Peterson. Let's start by having each of you introduce yourselves by telling us a little bit about who you are and the work that you do with Telepresence robots. Amy, would you like to start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Amy Peterson. I am a doctoral student in the Educational Psychology, Educational Technology program at Michigan State University. I am actually in the hybrid modality of the program, meaning that I do residencies on campus, but most of my education occurs online. And I work with the rest of the team in the synchronous learning and teaching environments a research group that includes John Bell, William Kane, and Sui Chang.
Thank you very much. Sui, could you introduce us to yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm a third-year doctoral student in the program of Educational Psychology and Educational Technology at MSU. My research interests includes online reading comprehension and also synchronous hybrid learning environment. That is, learning environment that integrate both face-to-face and online students at the same time.
Thank you very much. William, how about you?
So I'm William Kane. I'm the Assistant Director for the SEPSI COE Design Studio here at Michigan State University. I'm also a fifth-year doctoral student in Educational Psychology and Educational Technology. And most of my research interests have focused on teaching and learning in technology-rich environments.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And John?
Sure. I'm John Bell, professor here in the College of Ed, and been working with the Ed Psych Ed Tech PhD program in the hybrid mode for, well, in many ways, since just about the beginning of it, and focusing on the research of this, right now, primarily this robotic telepresence, of trying to figure out how do we engage face-to-face and online people in rich ways together so that everybody gains, and trying to figure out what happens when we do that.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your introductions. Now, it's time for me to admit something. I've had more exposure to these robots than a lot of the people who are watching, but I still have to admit that I don't always follow what it is that all of you do. So, John, I think it would be great if you could start off by giving us just a brief overview of what this work is, so that we can all be on the same page and learn more from what you have to say.
Great. Glad to do that. So let me share my screen here so that you can. I'm just going to walk through a few slides, but then also a little bit of orientation and pictures of things. So we face the challenge of we want to increase access to face-to-face academic context. So our doctoral program started as a face-to-face program, and then we wanted to expand that to include people who are not physically present. And so we love the idea of increasing access, and we want to do it while maintaining quality for everyone, so that the fact that you're not physically present doesn't mean that somehow you got a lesser education, a lesser degree. We've actually shifted our thinking into saying, actually, we believe that we can possibly increase the quality for everyone, so that the experience for face-to-face students is better because online students have joined us. And so trying to make that work, we've experimented this, what we call our first generation synchronous hybrid. And here are just different pictures of things we've done, of creating video links between two classrooms, of having a face-to-face class and a bunch of people show up on the screen. So you see in the diagram here this idea of a bunch of people who are face-to-face, and then a bunch of people who log in via a video conference session. We did some initial experimentation by having people come each on their own iPad. And that really opened up for us some possibilities of trying to understand, what does it mean for people who aren't here to feel like they're really present? And the thing that got our attention was this idea of embodiment, of what is it that that makes it feel like people are here even though they don't have a physical presence. And so the metaphor for us is that our first generation was this idea, you see a circle where the people are physically present with each other, and then somebody wants to join, they come via video conference, but they're stuck behind the glass. So it's like being able to look through the glass, and there's a warm community of people inside, and I can see them, and I can listen to them, and if I knock on the glass, they might hear me, and yet I always feel like I'm behind the glass. And so then robotic telepresence, we've thought maybe it has the promise to say now, along with the people who are physically present with each other, we can actually bring people through the glass. So they now enter through the glass and they come into the space with us. And so that's led to the exploration of robotic telepresence. And I've got here pictures of a range of these from the Kubi, which basically you put an iPad in a swiveling base, and the person at home or the person at a distance can turn that. The double, which is kind of like a Segway robot, that the person at the other end can drive it around. And again, just putting an iPad into the top, but their picture shows up on both of these, and then they can drive, they can speak. And then more advanced robots. They range from a couple of $100s per robot, all the way up. The iRobot is many tens of thousands, $60,000 or more per robot. So a big range. And one of the things that we've done to try to give everyone a feel for this is that each of us has behind us one of these robots, and you can see different ones interacting on it. So if we start, let me turn off my conference or my screen share here, so that then you can see behind me is, and William, I don't know if you can control this.
Sure,
so
I
behind
can
me,
go ahead and pop on now.
I'm sorry?
Let me see if I can pop on real quick.
Okay, so I have, yeah, so here's this device, and so you see William on this device, and now William, can you turn and look at me?
Yes. I'm trying to juggle a couple of cameras here, but yeah, I
Okay.
can give you a nod, I can give you a yes and a no.
And so William can turn and look around the room, and his picture shows up here, so that in a meeting, he turns and looks at people and talks, and his movement makes me believe that he's actually here. And then behind William, we have another one of the robots, a double robot, and Zoe actually is logged into that one. So William, let us see that one.
So Zoe is right behind me. She's actually on park a little bit, but she can go ahead and kind of give you a little bit of a directional control and show you how she kind of moves around.
Mm-hmm. I can turn around
Huh.
and also move
So she
around.
can actually move back and forth. She can move close to me. She can move far away. She can move around the room. She's fully mobile. And it also makes use of an iPad that's mounted at the top.
That's very cool. One of my jokes when people move away from me in class is I have to ask myself whether, I have to assure them that I showered that day, that I don't smell, but I guess that's one of the bonuses of being in class on a robot, is if the person you're working with did not shower that day, you do not have to deal with that. But I know
Never
that's
know.
not. I know that's not the main reason that you all do robots. So I'll let you pick that back up and bring us back to the realm of the serious.
Well, and so behind Sway, Amy is actually logged into one of the more expensive robots. So let's see that.
See, Amy can move closer to me and then far away.
And
I
so,
would also mention that you can hear directionally with this robot. So I can hear when Shui's to the right of me versus to the left of me. And she can see better where I'm looking. So right now I could be looking over her shoulder, or I can kind of look off to the other side, and she can tell what I'm paying attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let me switch back to my screen share and just show you some pictures of actually using this in class. And what I want to go back to is this idea that to us is really important, is that whenever we bring an innovation into the classroom, we're addressing a need or an opportunity. And if we pick the solution before we know what problem we're solving, we only succeed by chance. So we have said, here's our goal. We've got face-to-face students, we've got online students. We don't have the ability to double up all our teaching. So we don't have enough instructors to teach 2 sections of the course. So if we're going to have online students, they have to be able to join in this class. What do we do so they get the same quality of learning? And so this first picture, one of our faculty, Dr. Greenhow, is teaching in a place where you can see the face-to-face students, and then you can see 2 doubles where one is chosen to be tall and one is chosen to be short, but they had the freedom to decide they wanted to sit in the front of the class and be able to see the instructor. Another class, again with Dr. Greenhow we were working with, this is a class where we had a dozen online students and 1 face-to-face student, and we started the class where the dozen online students were all up on the screen. They were all in a video conference. We wondered what would happen when we give them the chance to be in the room. And so here you see we've got a bunch of the Kubi, the swivel type robots, and then we had 2 of the double robots. And so we've got a face-to-face student, and then all these students are now spread around the space. And the classic line from this class was, once we put all the people into this space with robots, when they all can turn on their own, and I have to say it's a funny thing, when all of a sudden all these robots turn because they want to look at the instructor or look at somebody else who's speaking. The statement from the student was, finally I'm not alone. There's really a sense in which these other people have now entered into the space. Another use, these are the beam robots, the bigger robots. Here's a time when we had 4 people who were all online talking with each other, and I joined the conversation just to be a part of their interaction. I have to say that these robots do not get taller or shorter, and so I'm doing the classic beam slouch, where I'm feeling like I'm really too tall to talk to them, but you have to kind of shrink down to feel like you can fit with them. And then here's a time where people are seated, but a research group here in our program where we have people joining physically in person as well as robots, people who otherwise couldn't join this meeting coming from far away. Let me just say a word then about some aspects of our thinking about this. Our goal in using these robots is this idea that we refer to as mutualism, where everybody's better off because we've brought online people in. Early on, when we tried to combine face-to-face and online students, the online students often sacrificed. So, for instance, we could write that on the whiteboard. Oh, we can't do that because the online students can't see it very well. So let's try to do it another way. Or the online students can't hear us right now. Everybody wait while we try to solve this, right? So sometimes the face-to-face students thought maybe we'd be better off if they weren't in this class. And so our goal is mutualism, where everybody is better off because they've come. And the way we get there is through this idea of social presence. And this idea that we want the online participants to feel like they are really a part of the shared space. And we're doing that through this effort of embodiment, of saying if people could be embodied in a robot, this sense that they're physically located in the shared space, and the interaction strategies. So we clearly see that just giving people a robot doesn't now solve the problem. There are really key strategies that we want people to, that both the leader, the instructor or the research leader, and the participants need to follow in order to be effective in their work. So that's a quick overview both of the way we've been using the robots and our rationale for why they seem like useful things to be using.
Thank you so much for that overview. I think it comes as a great time now that the idea of online education, that you don't have to be in the same room or even the same state or even the same country as your instructor or professor, as that idea is gaining steam. This is a really interesting idea of keeping some of the advantages of that, but at the same time feeling like you have a presence. And Amy, you were telling us a little bit about your unique role in the program. So all of us are affiliated with Michigan State University, but Amy, you don't live in Michigan. You take your classes online. Have you used these robots as a student in any of the classes that you've taken?
I've only used them in a class once, and we used it sort of partway through the course. So before I began attending via robot, I was attending via a web conference session, Zoom. And we would do small group work. And when we transferred over to me becoming a robot, not only did my perceptions of people change, but I could tell that the way people were reacting to me was different. I was suddenly part of the room. I was someone who was actually there physically versus being somebody who's kind of on a television screen. So not only did I find that people engaged with me more often, but I could also, it sort of eased my engagement with others because I could see people more clearly, and I could, I wasn't seeing people through sort of wide-angle lenses. So it really helped the interaction. It really helped all the small group work that we were doing.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Sway, I'd like to turn the next question to you. So John's told us a little bit about the different kind of devices that you use, and Amy's given us a hint at what that might look like in a classroom, but I understand that you've used these robots in a number of different ways. Could you tell us a little bit about the different learning environments that you have used these robots in and what you've learned from those experiences?
Yeah. Actually, just as John has showed us, we have experimented with robots in various environments, including doctoral classes, brown bag seminars, and also academic conferences. For most of the classes, we have both online students and face-to-face students. We found that the context really matters. For instance, who are you interacting with? Online people or face-to-face people? If you are interacting with face-to-face people, then robots would be very helpful. So when you use the robots, you can occupy physical space and move within the physical space. So our online students actually said they feel they were actually in the physical room with the face-to-face people. And also, you saw that we have one class. There's only one face-to-face student, and the other students are all online. And when we first introduced the robots, the face-to-face students said, "Okay, I'm no longer alone." She was excited to see those robots introduced in the classroom. And also, if you are interacting with strictly online people, our users actually prefer not using robots because they're all online, and they with the traditional video conferencing tools such as Zoom or Hangout, they can see all the people. But with the robots, you can see only 5 or 4 people, and you need to turn or move around to see all the people. And also, we know for the traditional video conferencing tools, we have multiple channels. For instance, we can easily share the screen, but for the robots we have right now is still hard to see even if we can share the screen in Beam, it's hard to see their screen.
Okay, so it sounds like this isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes. And also, a lot of other factors matter. For instance, the design level of participation or designed and desired. For instance, we have lecture-based classes and also classes that involve a lot of discussions. For the lecture-based classes, robots are not that helpful because for most of the time, the audience is just listening. There is little active participation involved. So using robots in this environment would not help much. And also, people do not want to attract others' attention because there's no point in attracting attention. And also, we try to use the robots for people to attend the EPAT Brown Bag seminar. People actually barely used them unless we asked them to try them out, because they just want to be the audience listening to the lecture. But it depends on the role that you play. For instance, I actually used Kubi to deliver a talk in an academic conference. So I was the presenter. In that way, I wanted to attract people's attention. So I think using Kubi helped me in presenting my work.
Thank you very much. So just to sort of build off of that, and maybe asking all of you, because I know that you've all had a range of experiences working with these. So if there were a teacher who was really interested in the idea of having robots in his or her classroom and came to you for advice, what advice would you give them? Would they need to make other changes? What sort of questions would you invite them to ask themselves to make sure that they're ready for this big step?
I mean, so I guess I can kind of speak to that a little bit. For an instructor who wants to, or a teacher who would like to put a device like this in their classroom, there are a number of questions that they can ask, and they really sort of need to look at their own practice, I would say, first, and try to understand why this device? What is it that I'm doing in the classroom that would really benefit from a greater, either greater social presence or a different type of remote social presence that the devices sort of enable? So that's kind of I don't know, it sounds kind of technical putting it that way, but it really is sort of basically just the teacher saying, why would I want one of these devices? What is it bringing to the classroom? What is the student getting out of it? And what do the students as a whole get out of using the device like this? So looking at it as a pedagogical strategy as opposed to maybe say, what's at the heart of it? Is it an ad hoc strategy? Do I have a student, maybe a special needs student, or a student who can't be there on campus that day or be in the building? Is it a device that would kind of fulfill that need, or is it a real pedagogical strategy that the device that this robot is there and it's there for a purpose? So I guess I would start there at least.
So it's not really about the robots, is the impression that I'm getting. It's more about the students and using the robots to support them.
Right, and it really is how it fits kind of within the overall framework of the course, and what are the strategies that are driving the course itself before you would introduce the device.
Yeah, actually.
Oh, go ahead, Shui.
I wanted to add a few words about that. Like, So I talked about the lecture-based classes. William mentioned the pedagogy. I think that really matters. I think we have classes that involve a lot of discussions, and students really enjoyed using robots when they have group discussions or small group discussions.
And I think once you've sort of established the intent and really sort of lined that out, I think another piece of it is to have preparation sessions for the students so that they get over the novelty effect. No matter what robot you're interacting with, there's the navigation piece of it, certainly, which in most cases is very intuitive, but there's you're also navigating sort of in a different form of embodiment. So, you know, being able to navigate over bumpy surfaces or into a crowd of people takes practice. So having some time for students to get acclimated to that, to figure out how to kind of maneuver in this new body, I think can really help.
And I would just add, Amy brings up a really interesting point. We've been lucky here in the EPET program in educational psychology and educational technology. We deal mostly with mature learners. We're dealing with grown-ups who have serious academic goals. They're generally older, so there's a certain emotional maturity also that goes in there. They're responsible folks on the whole. But the idea of introducing these robotic devices, maybe in a K-12 environment or certainly a middle school or high school environment, it might be met with sort of different, maybe a different mindset. Let's put it that way, as to what role the devices are fulfilling and what kind of human-robot interactions that might take place at the school. So that's something that I would think that educators and teachers would want to keep in mind when they're putting these devices in the room.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm supposedly a grown man, but I could still see myself getting really excited about a robot and forgetting about the learning. Yeah.
You know, I love tooling around. I know you can see some of the hybrid students. Amy, I mean, what's it like driving a Beam? You know.
I think it's really intuitive.
Spencer, I know that you are actually interested in game-based learning, and maybe you have played a lot of games. Actually, it seems that if you have some gaming experience, it would help you drive those robots. Like you feel comfortable driving them around. But of course, further research is needed for this, but it seems that way.
Yeah, and that makes sense, and that's probably something that's intuitive to a lot of the students in a K-12 environment. So maybe, you know, the getting them acclimated to robots is less about teaching them the controls than and more about teaching and taming their excitement.
Right, but that's why I think, and I think all of us might agree that when there's a serious pedagogical strategy behind the introduction of the robots into a classroom environment, the novelty effect can pretty much go away, and people see the purpose and the intention behind the devices, so that they're not treated just as gimmicks or toys, but really in service of a larger purpose within the class.
I would even say, even in a single class, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yes.
So a class isn't all lecture or all small group or, you know, any sort of one approach. And robots may be really appropriate for a certain piece of it, but might not be appropriate for a different piece of the course. So really matching the tool to what you're trying to get out of it. I would also say, you know, even the navigation of robots in those different environments. So one of the experiences I've had is going into sort of a more social casual situation on a robot and trying to navigate around groups of people versus navigating around a room where people are expecting me to participate as a student.
Could you say more about that?
Yeah, so when you
I'd
kind of
love to take a robot to a party one day, and so I just, it would be great to hear, some more about what you mean about that.
and this was sort of like a coffee party, so it wasn't that exciting. But when you come up to people who are in a group and a party, when you're not a robot, you can kind of edge in there. But as a robot, you have different physical space. So I do like to jokingly come up behind William and invade his personal space on the robot, because it has a different effect than if you were a person invading someone else's personal space. But in the social environment, you have to sort of be more creative on how you're getting attention, especially when you come up to a group of 3 or 4 people and you're trying to get included in the conversation. It's much different than if you're working in a small group in a classroom and people are expecting you to come over and to have a conversation with them.
Okay, thank you. Now I know all about social etiquette for cyborgs. I'm going to keep that in mind.
Or poor social etiquette in cyborgs.
Excellent. William, I'd love to ask you a question.
Sure.
So one of the things that has already been brought up is this idea that in the past you've worked with students who have been participating not through a robot but through teleconferencing software. And Skype is almost a household word these days. We're having this webinar on Google Hangouts. A lot of us are used to this idea of using webcams to talk to each other over a distance. How is a robot different from that? What is it? What have you learned about robotic telepresence that's different from other forms of video communication?
I guess it really goes back to what John was saying, and we've sort of learned this over time, and it was through direct observation. We kept thinking that what hybrid students needed on their end were better views of what was happening in the classroom. Better views, better production would equal a better experience for them as they sat in their remote location and watched what was happening here, say in a classroom here on the Michigan State University campus. But as we kept talking with our hybrid students and kept looking at the situation, we realized that we might be giving them a better view, but for the in-class students, there was still sort of it was a very thin representation of the hybrid students themselves. There really wasn't a lot of presence that we could feel from them. We kept having to, as a group or as individuals, we kept having to interact with 2 or 3, an aggregate of hybrid students that were framed in a certain way in a flat, two-dimensional manner. And over time, that can create a real psychological distance. This is something that Sway has worked with a lot, is the notion of this transactional distance. It's a psychological distance that's happening between these groups. And that, to me, was always the drawback for video conferencing. That the hybrid students might be getting a better view if we place the cameras differently. But we, as in-class students or on-campus students, we weren't getting a better view of them. And there wasn't a lot that they could do in that respect unless we gave them some form of embodiment. And it just so happens that we happen to live in a time and an age where things like robots, like remotely driven robots, are actually available. If this would have been happening 20 years earlier, it would be a discussion of what if. And we might be imagining what this would look like. And maybe it's kind of a Star Wars dynamic. Would it be a hologram? Would it be this? Would it be like that? Very nerdy stuff. But we're actually able to sort of play with this idea of what if we could have some way to embody those remote people here with us. And I think most of us would sort of agree that as advanced as some of the technology feels, we know that this is still sort of a primitive. It's sort of a primitive first steps sort of approach to bringing remote students and giving them a stronger type of presence in the classroom, so that stronger forms of social presence, the idea of a presence plus presence equal this social dynamic, that can take place within the classrooms and more and sort of impart more of a richer experience for everyone involved, not just the hybrid, not just the on-campus, but treating these two groups as equal and comparable partners.
I would also say that, it also depends on how many hybrid students and how many face-to-face students you have in a class.
Mhm.
So a lot of what William just described there is what we see happening in classes where there's a lot of students in the face-to-face classroom and there's only a handful of hybrid or online students. But the one class that Schwag kind of called attention to, where we had mostly online students and then one face-to-face and one face-to-face instructor, it was a different dynamic. When we talked to those students after the class, they really liked the robots for interacting with the face-to-face participants, but when online students were interacting with other online students, they actually preferred the video conferencing. That it didn't necessarily bridge the physical space for them with other online students.
Yeah, so it goes back to, it depends on who you are interacting with. Yeah.
Very nice. It's
Spencer, if I can jump in, we have a question. Okay, we have a question from Punya, actually, on the Titan pad. He's asking that it appears clear that social presence of the visitor coming into the meeting via robots is pretty strong. And he wonders what the experience is from the point of view of the person at a distance. Do they feel increased presence in the meeting or a greater feeling of agency? So I think, let's start with John. Do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. So one thing that was fascinating to me was that we, in a case where we took somebody off of a video conference and then gave them a presence on a robot, it was the first time they actually tried to learn the names of face-to-face students. That until then, it didn't matter if they knew their names. But now there was this opportunity for direct interaction with people, and now their names mattered. And so when somebody feels the need to know others' names, I would say clearly they have a greater sense of presence. The other aspect that is fascinating is that in this case right now, I cannot show my attention to any of you uniquely. I can't individually do that. And so when somebody comes via a video conference, actually, ironically, the only time I'm actually looking that person in the eye, I clearly cannot be making eye contact with you because I have to be looking at the camera for you to think I'm looking at your eyes. And so this discernible attention, this was a huge thing for the online students to realize when the instructor is looking at me in my robot, everybody knows that. I know it because the instructor is only looking at me. Everybody else knows the instructor is looking at me, or at least not at them. And so this idea of discernible attention, I think, is very powerful. And it means now I matter as an individual, not just, they're looking someplace, but I don't know if they're looking at me. And actually, for me, this is a significant thing to realize. To what degree am I demonstrating, in whatever means I have, that I'm paying attention to individuals, whereas sometimes in a video conference, it can feel like, well, we're talking about ideas, and we're all just talking to this space where the ideas are, and rather than sometimes feeling like, it doesn't matter who's talking, it's just ideas that are talking about stuff. Right. So the discernible attention, I think, is very powerful in empowering somebody to say, I matter as an individual.
If I can continue on that, I think, so William, you have been working with John Bell from a long time now as a researcher, and now you're assistant director at Design Studio, right?
Yes.
So, but you get to interact with people one-on-one a lot for your research reasons, and as a student in the education technology program, you have interacted with a lot of students who are hybrid and face-to-face. So based on your experience, would you like to add something to this question about the idea of increased presence in the meeting for students joining from a distance and like a greater feeling of agency?
I've So yeah, like you said, I've worked with a number of students who have been in this situation, particularly hybrid students. I think it's interesting. I think there's an interesting kind of dynamic going on, and it would reflect, I think, where people's original ideas or their original conceptions about social presence comes from, their own presence plus the social presence that they have with others. It's been my experience that the hybrid students who have been with the program the longest, they've had a lot of experience with video conferencing environments, and thinking about the two-dimensional style, whether it's Zoom or Google Hangouts or one of these other kind of platforms. This is the 2D representation of video conferencing. For them to go into what it's ostensibly a 2.5 or a 3-dimensional sort of representation, a 3-dimensional experience, where they're actually able to sort of navigate certain environments and to approximate certain behavioral engagement, certain behavioral cues, like being able to nod or look over your shoulder or to do something like that as a robot, I think it feels very empowering. I think it goes a long way towards giving them a certain agency, not only over how they perceive that environment, but how they're projecting their own identity within that remote environment. Now that can be an empowering thing. That can also be an anxiety-provoking kind of phenomenon. Sometimes you're unsure about whether how you're coming across on your robot. And as far as interacting with the robots, it also, like we've sort of touched on, it can be a very engaging experience. I like the idea of sitting around a table and not having to always look in a certain direction and sort of address a window, if you like, address this monitor, to have to talk to the people who are online. It feels like I feel like I'm at a bank teller window, or I'm that's not really real. But when I see Amy come in on a beam, and the 3 or 4 of us in our research group are already sitting at the table, and Amy comes over, and I think that's just marvelous, because I've done it enough times now where there's no novelty to it. I look up, I say, "Hey, Amy, what's up?" She's just like anyone else who's joining the group. She's a little late. She's a little early. She's got stories to tell. She's got this, that, or the other. To me, there's nothing special, and we've done really nothing special to make special accommodations for her. She's one of the gang. Right. So for me, that's just some of the neatest stuff, and it sort of levels the playing field. We start thinking more about content. We start thinking more about the reasons why we're there and the work that we hope to accomplish with each other in these kind of collaborative settings.
And on that note, before I transfer it on back to Spencer, I think it's fair to hear from Amy. I'm sorry there's an echo. But Amy, would you like to add to this as a researcher and as a hybrid student?
Yeah, so as a student, I think being on the robots has really changed how people perceive me. I mean, I can tell that people realize that I'm in the room. I'm not just somebody sort of on a wall. It's also much easier for me to interact informally with other students, so it's not always we have to be talking about big important research questions. It can be also just kind of getting to know each other. I think it takes a lot of the artificiality out of interaction. And then I would say in the research that we've done, there was definitely a theme that we found in the interviews when students went from being sort of in Zoom sessions or web conferencing sessions to being in on the robots. They could see so much better. They could tell. You can tell who's speaking to you, and you can tell that they're specifically paying attention to you. I would also say that a lot of them mentioned that they felt that their group members engaged more with them when they were on the robots. People said things like, it feels like you're really there, that they're physically present, and they like the autonomy of being able to move themselves around. So they know something's kind of going on off in a side of the room. They can move themselves over to it, or they can stay where they are. Having that autonomy to be where you want to be and to listen to the conversation that you want to listen to is very empowering for the online students who are coming into a physical space.
If I can share a brief anecdote, a friend of mine was in a class that did not have robots, but that did have face-to-face students and online students in the same space. And she found something very funny where there was someone who was joining from web conferencing software who had clearly forgotten that he was in class. He had muted his microphone and was making some gestures to someone off screen. Nothing obscene, fortunately, but gestures that made it clear that he was bored with what was going on. And this friend of mine who was in the class as an actual person was thinking that has he forgotten that he's actually in the classroom with us? And I'm guessing, I'm hoping at least that these sort of dilemmas, these sort of problems wouldn't come up. You know, if you have a metal body in the classroom, you're a lot less likely to forget that you're a part of the group.
Yeah, and I think there's a real difference between what the online student perceives when they're being projected in a Zoom session in a classroom versus what actually how they are projected. So in an online student sees sort of the interface that we see now where people are flipping back and forth between being the speaker. In the online classroom where that Zoom session is projected on screen, everyone who's online has sort of a full picture of everything that they're doing at every moment. So, you know, you can talk to the face-to-face students. I mean, they know every online student because there's a big, you know, face of that person present on this large screen all the time. So, like, anything you do, you know, if you scratch your ear or something, everyone can see it. And it sort of makes when the online students realize that, they start to sort of temper what they're doing. They become very aware of how much they make distractions. So they mention things like, you know, kind of being afraid to take a drink of water because everyone will watch them take a drink of water. So it's interesting the way just the projection of students in the different modalities changes the way people act.
Well, thank you all very much. We're all coming up on the end of the webinar now, but one thing that I'd like to do to just sort of finish up is, so as I said at the beginning of the webinar, this isn't something that's in classrooms all across the nation today, but I'm guessing that what you've learned doing this research, working with these robots, has probably changed the way that you think about teaching and learning in general. And so I'm wondering if each of you could just briefly share one tip that you would give to teachers working without robots that you've learned with working with these exciting new technologies.
So one of the things for me is just this awareness of the presence of students, of thinking of my own awareness of individuals, and I guess the thing that's gotten most of my attention is how do I affirm individuals that I'm aware of them? How do I let them know that I know they're here? And that to me has become very powerful. I've seen what it's like for students who feel like I'm transparent. I'm not actually here. People talk past me. They talk about me. And realizing that when I teach, I haven't consciously thought about that. And to realize, how do I let the people that I'm speaking with know that I know they're here? And that I'm adjusting what I do in a way that represents my own appreciation for who they are and what they're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think John just kind of stole my thunder a little bit, thinking about social presence, and yeah, that's the one thing that I think has been emerging as well. The notion, I think maybe a naive understanding on my part of what social presence really meant. I think just being there felt like it was enough. In the same way that I was thinking video conferencing, can you see me? Can you hear me? Well, that's enough. That's good. That's good enough to engage in a sort of a learning dialogue. And understanding that, kind of what John was hinting at, this sort of feedback of me recognizing another in a way, or acknowledging another, that they are acknowledging my acknowledgement that I have, and acknowledge their acknowledgement of my acknowledgement. This sort of feedback loop that sort of reinforces, but it gets stronger the more that it is reinforced. And suddenly, with that development, the stronger bonds of social presence that can happen either they're mediated or unmediated can really lead to powerful learning experiences where people are drawing in closer connection with one another. That's the kind of thing that I've noticed, that working through mediation technologies, that there's other things that are going on underneath that are quite powerful.
Thank you.
Again, I wanted to highlight the importance of context. Like, we know that robots are helpful in certain situations, but are not helpful in others. So the context are really important. No matter what technologies you are using, you need to be aware of the context.
Thank you.
And I would say that one of the themes that I have seen in a lot of the different classes that we've worked with is the idea of what the instructor is doing. So the instructor's intent and how they are being deliberate about sort of bringing parity of interaction to the students. It's something that I think we've seen students in both modalities say it over and over. When the instructor is very thoughtful about how they're getting students to interact, the interaction always seems better, and potentially leads to greater social presence, regardless of what technology you're using to do that.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad we ended on this note because all of you had great things to say, and I think you taught us a valuable lesson for all of us who are studying educational technology, who are using technology in our classrooms. No matter how we're using it, there's a great lesson here that it's not really about the tech, it's not really about the fancy new toy, it's really about the students and really about what we're doing for them to help them learn. That's a great note to end on, so I think we'll wrap it up here. But I'd like to thank you all. Thank you, John. Thank you, William. Thank you, Tsui, and thank you, Amy. I've learned a lot from you. I hope that the other viewers of our video will also learn a lot. Even if it's not about robots, I think that there's so much that they will learn from what you've been able to share today. So I'd like to thank you very much for being on the webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. And with that in mind, we will let everyone go. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you all next month for the next webinar.